The following is intended only for mature audiences. Viewer and listener discretion is advised.
Hey folks, P. Basardo here, and you're listening to the Smoke Free Radio Network.
That was interesting.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Vaping in the Mic. I'm Mike Peterson. This evening, we have a gentleman that has agreed to join me. We'll talk about a few different things in the political arena. But what I have found to be ironic was how this came to be, what really grabbed my attention. There was a post that was done by Lindsay Stroud. And it's of this gentleman who is speaking, and it's doing so at the state legislative. And the quote that he has is phenomenal. And I looked at that, and I read the quote, and I said, the quote is fantastic. And then there was something that got the better of me. I turned around after that, and I made a comment down below, and I said, I love this. But sadly, in this picture, it looks like the people behind him would rather be placing their lunch order. That was me being a smartass. But this guy took it in stride. And he could have done many things. He could have come right back and wiped me with, the floor with me and all kinds of things. But do you know what he said? Very simply, he goes, those are the clerk's staff just doing their job. And I sat here and went, whoa, wait a minute. I like this guy. And immediately, within a couple of minutes after that, I got in touch with him and I said, hey, would you be interested in? And he goes, yeah. I'm like, awesome. So, if you would, please welcome New Hampshire State Representative Jason Osborne. How are you doing, sir?
Oh, doing great. Thanks for having me, Mike.
Oh, man, I really appreciate you being here. You and I were discussing a little bit of things before our show started. And it was the one thing, your comment just really knocked me for a loop, because I've had people come back with pitchforks, knives, all kinds of remarks, you don't know what you're talking about. And you were really laid back. And I started looking into some of the things that you've done, or posts that you've made. And it almost makes me wish that there were duplicates of you that I could put in Ohio and take most of the other people out. One, because...
That's funny. I actually moved here from Ohio.
Oh, my God.
For that particular reason. You might want to think about hopping in the car and getting out of there.
Do you see what's happening in Ohio, folks? This is killing me. That's funny. I did not know that. But your quote about vaping makes it very much a point that you are pro-vaping.
Yes, I've been a vape evangelist for many, many years now.
And there's not enough people like you. Not only do you vape, and not only are you a vape evangelist, but you're open-minded. You don't sit there and have, just even as talking to you in the pre-show, you don't have this stigma of a brick wall that you're saying, here's what I believe, here's what I don't believe. You're willing to listen to things.
I certainly try to be. I've often been accused of the opposite. So.
Yeah, I've been accused of a lot of things, most of them not very pleasant. One of the things that I wanted, your reply to me made me sit and think. Honest to God, your short reply, it probably took me 10 or 12 hours to think about things, where I was coming from, what I said, what my mindset was. I spoke with my wife about it for 2 or 3 hours, okay, because it made me think. And it dawned on me, there are many people in the vaping industry that are, A, afraid to approach any kind of legislative body, even if it's a city council, but B, we may not be doing so in a best fashion. Would you say that's true?
It oftentimes is the case. I've certainly seen plenty of examples of it. Referring to your comment, I did not take that as anything other than just an honest observation.
Yeah.
Like you could have said, "Why are those assholes not paying attention?" or something like that.
But you did. You replied politely, succinctly, and without any kind of malice. And for somebody to do so in a political body, that really, it took me by surprise. Honest to God, it did. When you say that you've had people, or you have seen people approaching, or had people present themselves, their cause, their beliefs, whatever, have you seen people come in that a legislative body, a group, a panel, whatever you might want to call it, were they turned off by appearance and then did not hear what the person said?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I'll refer to the hearing we had on the vape tax bill that started this whole thing. Certain people came in very professional and had very coherent and succinct points to make. Other people came in, one guy in particular with blue spiky hair and a T-shirt and a gun on his hip, and just ranted about, how dare you people? And, nobody's going to listen to that. I mean, I get where he's coming from, and it probably made him feel good to do it, but wasn't particularly helpful, and I wish he hadn't been there.
Now, I would have to almost assume that individual did more harm than good to the entire cause of what they were trying to represent.
Yes, absolutely.
So in broad strokes, and I don't want anybody that's listening, watching, going to listen to the podcast, anything, I don't want people to think I'm trying to browbeat people into saying, you've got to wear a suit, you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to talk very proper. No, I'm trying to let people know you need to dress appropriately. At least put on a polo shirt and a decent pair of jeans. Don't look like you walked in from a weekend camping.
Sure. Well, you also don't want to look like a lobbyist either. So it's probably best not to put on the suit.
Okay.
Probably just normal street clothes.
Now, when you say that, what would you define what a lobbyist looks like so that people have an understanding?
They're wearing a suit, and they, in our legislature, they have a big orange badge. So that's how you really know who they are. But
wow.
If someone seems like they're being paid to be there, or they have some other agenda, then you look at them a little more skeptically. Whereas if they're just a normal person, and again, in particular in our legislature, the number of normal people who show up to testify at any particular bill is very small, unless it's a big bill that's been in the news. What have you, you'll have a nice long line of people. But on any average bill, the only people you hear from are other legislators and the lobbyists and the department representatives.
Wow. Okay. New Hampshire has a Tobacco 21 bill that is coming up. And again, I'll apologize. I don't know if it is on a state level or if it's on a local level. It may very well be on a local level.
We've had a couple localities actually pass it, yes.
Okay.
But, it did fail at the state level this time.
If somebody were coming in, or a group of people, shop owners, manufacturers such as myself, the first thing, what would be the best practice for us to come in to be able to present what we're doing that might better grab someone's attention? You yourself, you're going to be listening because you are in favor of vapor products and things like this. But how would I go about getting the attention of someone that typically opposes? How can I at least get them to listen? I'm not going to browbeat them into saying, damn it, you're going to vote for me or vote for my side. How can I get them to listen to what I want to say?
So the advice I always give is prepare a packet of material with the testimony you want to give and any supporting documentation, or the more the better. Bring copies of it for the committee members. Pass them out. Do not read your testimony, but just give some simple, succinct summary of what you're handing out. Because people will take the time to look at it if you've taken the time to prepare it for them. But if you want to sit there and read from a piece of paper, everyone's going to zone out and not listen to what you're saying. And then, people don't usually vote on facts; they vote on emotion, right? So if you need to come up with some kind of personal story about what you're presenting that will maybe tear people up a little bit and get them on your side.
Now that would be interesting because I know that there are people that want to come in and they want to yell and they scream and use all kinds of foul language. If I were to bring a 76-year-old lady in and she were to say, I smoked for 49 years, I started vaping, now I breathe easier, please don't take my vapor product away from me. Would that be a benefit, or would that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the more of those, the better, right? Because you have these lobbyists that show up that talk about how this is not a smoking cessation product, according to the FDA, right? And so if they hear that over and over again, then that's what they're going to believe. So that you need, for every one of those lobbyists, you need 100 people to come in and say, no, it is. Sorry. The FDA can say what it wants. It actually is a smoking cessation device.
And that's a big one because there's so much damage that is done in the news that sway people before we even get a chance to talk to them. And I'm sure that you've seen that to where they're still bringing up the same old debunked articles from years ago about the popcorn lung and the formaldehyde and I don't know what all the other things, heavy metals. Yeah. Do other people still listen to that? I mean, is that such a repetitive kind of thing?
90 seconds.
Yeah, I think enough. Unless someone knows somebody who quit smoking using vapor products, they're probably just seeing the stuff on the periphery of their paying attention in the news, and that's what they're left with. Wow.
Because it is one of those things that I know when you get lobbyists coming in from Juul or Altria, and they're voting for a Tobacco 21 law to be passed. And do people on the board or a panel look at that because of their stature? That these people have a heavier weight than Joe Public coming in that is a store owner?
It depends on the issue. I'm not particularly familiar with any of the hearings on the Tobacco 21 issue that hasn't come in front of me yet. So I'm surprised that Altria is lobbying for it. What's the agenda there?
Altria bought a 30 or 35% stake, and somebody in the chat room, if you would, let me know, because I'm brain dead at this point. But Altria bought a stake for $12.5 billion in Juul. Mm-hmm. And now they are trying to push Juul products as much as possible. But the FDA has gone after Juul because they are predominantly the source of this teen nicotine epidemic material.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So
they're just
in
trying to
order
improve their reputation.
in order to save their ass from the FDA, they are trying to support Juul, saying, no, we believe in Tobacco 21. Well, until the FDA said anything, both of you folks, both Juul and Altria, didn't care that it was 18. It's just now with the FDA coming after him, it's now 21, and they're all for that. They're also for, unfortunately, a per mil tax.
Yes.
I don't know if you've seen that. There was a per mil tax that went through in New Hampshire. And
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
the unfortunate part with that, for people that are listening or watching that may not understand, in every Juul pod is less than 1 milliliter of e-liquid. And it is at 50 milligrams strength. So in that pod, there's 47 milligrams of nicotine, roughly. And so they want to tax on a per mil. So they're going to be taxing only less than 1 mil, even if it were 1 mil. The tax on that item is very small when that's the product that is doing all the damage, and yet to get a 60 mil bottle of e-liquid, they're charging tax on 60 mil, which is much higher. Mm-hmm. And people don't realize that. That I learned, and that one stuck with me. In your tenure, how many pieces of legislation have you seen come across on a state level that are dealing with vapor or vapor products or tobacco products, because we're labeled a tobacco product?
Yeah, we get a couple every year. So this particular tax bill you're talking about, we killed last year when we were in charge of things, and then and we're not in charge this year, so it sailed through, and yeah, it's unfortunate. It's all the same arguments all over again, and they just don't want to get it, and they don't understand that they're playing into the hands of big tobacco and big pharma, for that matter.
Yeah, you if you've watched anything coming out from the FDA, or if it has come across on the state level, that the FDA came out and said, oh, well, we're looking into now that e-cigarettes are causing seizures. And they only had 35 reported cases through 9 years, but Big Pharma and the FDA didn't bother to tell you the same amount of reported cases were for and had because of NRT products, gum, patches, nasal spray, things like that. That's what the FDA didn't tell you. I'm curious. You and I spoke about a couple of different things. You mentioned oddity laws, and I saw it in your post. Is it New Hampshire alone, or are we seeing legislation trying to be passed that has absolutely no business being in front of you? And the one that I was asking about particularly, and you mentioned a couple of others, but the one I asked you about particularly was that they're trying to do something with life coaching.
Oh, right. They want to license life coaches.
To what reason? And what kind of standards are they trying to pass to make that happen?
You know what? I didn't even look at the bill. I saw what they were trying to do. I knew I would be against it, and I didn't care to know anything about it. But we get over 1,000 bills per year that come through the legislature.
Really?
And we don't get paid to look at them, so it's tough to sift through and figure out the ones that need to be highlighted and which ones don't. But there's just people out there who think that everybody needs to be licensed, and they're just looking around for everybody who isn't and trying to add them to the list.
Most recently, and you may have been aware, you may not have been, because you deal with a wide array, not just any vaping. Sacramento has now passed a flavor ban on all products, as well as banning all e-liquid products, any vapor products. So if you go, not Sacramento, I apologize, San Francisco.
So why do they need both? If the vapor products are banned, why do they need a flavor ban too?
That I really don't know. But they've turned around and they had really created a problem. And I'm going to try and look this up just really quickly, but the entire thing, and I've heard this, would you say that it is true or not? People, when they pass laws on the West Coast, that it is used as a precedent in larger states on the East Coast, New York, New Jersey, places like this. Will they use that as a buttress and pass a law similar to it?
Oh yeah, that's yes, that is how it works. California does something, and everyone else starts following suit.
And it was Sacramento City Council decided to ignore all the public information that people had come and presented to them, and they just turned around and they said, in a nutshell, screw you. They voted in favor of a flavor ban including menthol. No exemptions, no mitigation, no nothing. And it will begin...
This is for all tobacco products?
It's for everything, all tobacco products.
Wow.
It's not just... It said it decided to ignore better proposals. No concern for small businesses, no concern about former smokers that turned to vaping. And it is very much looking... And that piece of legislation sent a shiver down the spine of all the vaping companies, all the vapors that are paying attention. Because now it looks like this may become the next thing that New York would pick up. Because New York is, again, they're sitting. Cuomo's got a flavor ban. He hasn't signed off and he hasn't said no. But they're looking at a heavy tax, 20% tax, a flavor ban, and all of this. Is it likely?
I don't doubt it for a second. That's absolutely coming.
Is it likely that large cities will try to follow this same thing?
Absolutely. So, the larger the city, the worse it is in terms of these nanny laws that they want to pass.
This is the question out of the chat room. James Jarvis, who is the president of the Ohio Vapors Trade Association here in Ohio, has been working against the Tobacco 21 bill in Ohio hard with lobbyists and everything. But he said, what effect does it have when they bring kids in to testify on or against a bill?
Oh, man, I think that it depends on the issue, and I do think it's pretty effective unless it's really obvious that they're just coached into doing it. I'm thinking of some of these videos I saw from Washington where the kids are being paraded around to talk about the Green New Deal. Probably not effective. But for the vape hearing, let's say, if they brought a bunch of kids in from the local high school to talk about, oh, the vaping is everywhere. I can't even go to the bathroom because I can't breathe in there because everyone's just sitting there vaping. And, oh my God, they would probably listen to that.
And these other representatives or senators or other, how can they justify that in their mind when they're hearing something from a minor that can't vote, one, and two, for me personally, when the FDA said that they were looking at, and they put out their ANPRM, Advance Notice for Rulemaking, about flavoring, there were 23,000 people that responded to that, and they called all of them anecdotes. And yet, these kids that come parading in before assembly are taking whatever it is they're saying, and the people that are listening, you and others, and I will say others, not you personally, are taking what they're saying as bona fide factual material. How do they justify that in their brain? If you can comment on that. I don't mean to put you on the spot.
I wish I knew. It's as baffling to me as it is to you, I think.
So if we were to bring, we meaning the vapor company, the vapor technology company, VTA, Ohio Vapor Trade Association, myself, as a manufacturer, if I grabbed 13 high schoolers and they turn around and they came in and they had their own stories to tell about their parents vaping instead of smoking, and they don't smell bad and they don't this anymore, and they breathe easier and they run further and they're coming to all the football games, whatever, would that have an impact on a positive side?
I think it absolutely would. Again, with the same caveat, as long as it doesn't look like they were coached and brought there. And to your previous point about them not being able to vote, while that may be true, every kid has at least one parent or two that does vote, right? And is probably keeping tabs on their activities. So if they know that they were treated very well by their representatives, then they might be more likely to vote for them.
Good point. One that I had not thought of. Because I discuss politics with my kids, but only in the amount of how it happens, why it happens, not my personal political beliefs, because I want them to form their own thoughts and opinions. But I see in Kentucky, when they were trying to pass a Tobacco 21 law, I had kids sitting at the table giving their stories about Johnny this and that. And they tried to tie in a piece of information to say, if this goes through, we're also going to create a hotline where other teens can call in and report other teens that are using nicotine products.
Oh, that's what we want. Create
thinking
snitch culture. Yeah.
A snitch culture, and it reminded me, unfortunately, because I'm 50, it reminded me very much of history. And yes, the Nazi Germany party wants your kids to snark and snitch on the neighbors who are doing something that is not legal.
Yep.
Really, folks, it's horrible, and it's the way that everything is running along. Oh, James was saying it. James worked hard in Ohio, along with some other areas. Do you find that you hear from, and I know the lobbyist would be one of them, but do you find that you hear from certain people more often about subjects? Like if it were a vapor subject, do you hear more often from very individual particular people, or do you get a smattering of like shop owners?
Like I said, we almost never get the normal everyday Joes coming in to speak about anything. It's always either lobbyists or people who have a particular passion around a particular issue. So, when school issues come up, there are various nonprofit groups that lobby for particular agendas, and they're not necessarily lobbyists because they're not paid, but they're still very concerned about particular topics, and they will show up on every single one of those bills.
Would it help if people, myself, store owners, whatever, would it help if we showed up with the lobbyist or in greater numbers?
Absolutely. Yeah, the more people who show up, the better. And if you can't show up, send an email or a postcard. Because those will get looked at. Here's what doesn't get looked at is when you click a button on a web form that generates an email. Those go straight to the trash can.
Really?
If you take the time to write a personal message, those will typically get looked at. As long as you're a constituent of the particular representative. If you are not, you are a lot more likely to be ignored.
Okay, let me ask you this, because I know right now in Ohio is working with OHVTA and CASA, the consumers group, and on the CASA website they have a kind of fill-in form. However, in this form you have to put your name, your address, and email to validate, and it actually validates your address, but then it shows that this individual person lives there and is of vaping capability. Does that still go more in the trash, or does that carry weight?
Yeah, if it's a form email and you're getting a dozen of them or more that all look exactly the same, you're not paying attention to them. Not only that, but we get a lot of people faking that they are constituents. So especially on a big ticket bill, you'll get the phone ringing off the hook with people calling. Oh, I'm your constituent. I need you to vote against this bill. I'm like, oh, you are? Where do you live? Or what do you think about the new Johnny's Diner? And if they say, oh, I love it, they're not calling from here.
Right.
Calling from some call center in Puerto Rico.
And that's why I think that CASA tried to validate actual address, person, and email. So I'm hoping that's going to carry some weight. If James Jarvis would say something more about that. I've got another question coming in. I hope you don't mind if I browse through some of these. Is that all right?
Oh, no, go ahead.
And these are just from how would you propose people might do some of these things. Bill Tarling. And I'm going to tell you, Bill Tarling is a guy that lives all the way out in Vancouver Island, Vancouver. And he knows more that's going on in the vaping industry than I would ever even think of. But he made a really good question. What's the best way for us, the vaping industry, to convey that vaping is not Juul? And that they're strictly one independent company, and the vape industry doesn't have any legal authority over them. How would we, from your standpoint as a legislative person, how would we best address that to a group panel? And can I ask, what would I call it? If I walked in front of you and a group of other people, representatives, what is that called?
When you show up to testify?
Yes.
Called testifying.
Okay, but what would the panel of people be called?
Oh, it's a committee.
Okay, thank you.
Again, I'm not familiar with how every state runs their legislative process, but that's how we do it.
That's okay. If I were to walk in, how could I get the committee to understand, there are times I wish I had a Juul so I could show people, how could I get them to understand that the Juul product is in and of itself one individual thing and does not constitute vaping as the rest of this community knows it?
Well, props are a good option. So we had Alex from the Vapor Technology Association come to our committee, and he brought an array of devices to demonstrate the difference between the closed and the open systems, and what you described with the high concentration of the nicotine in the Juul device as opposed to lower concentrations and the customizable nicotine levels in these other products.
Mm-hmm.
And how the tax on a Juul cartridge would be $1.25, but the tax on the juice that I use that's the equivalent of maybe 3/4 of a pack of cigarettes would be $8. And that kind of opened up their eyes a little bit.
And that's, I have heard very similar things, and I'm glad that you bring that up, because they walk in, they want to pass a tax or an outlaw of some kind, and people bring in the actual product, and they say, what's that? This is what you're trying to either tax the hell out of or outlaw. We thought it was bigger. What, you thought it was like a gallon of milk or something? And most of the time they would say yes. No, folks, it's not true. So props, very, very well. This one is from Lindsay Stroud. And she asked, can you ask how the representatives, how New Hampshire lawmakers might be citing things like formaldehyde and popcorn lung. Or are they citing it from a study, or is it just
Yeah, no, they'll throw it out like it's fact. They're just, oh, and we know that it has formaldehyde, and we know everyone's getting popcorn lung. Like, where's that coming from?
Oh my God.
And in some cases, you don't have an opportunity to even rebut it. So like for the picture that you saw where I was speaking on the floor, there's other people who got up on the other side, and they get the opportunity to say whatever they want, and you can't call them on it. And when you are speaking in favor of the bill, you get to go last.
So the people that are opposing have to present their information first to give the other people
Correct.
that are favoring the bill time to sit and come up with a retort.
Correct.
The people that are in the committee that may believe this or may buy into that particular formaldehyde, popcorn lung, whatever. If I were to cite, look, folks, here in the paperwork that I'm presenting to you, Public Health England has said, this is not true, this is not true, this is not true. It's 95% safer than smoking. Would they care?
Some people will and some people won't. So it's like with any issue, right? Everybody has their preconceived bias, and anything you throw at them might move them a little bit, but they're going to be anchored in that bias until something very personal, triggers them to change their mind. Having a loved one, quit smoking. That might be one. We had this one lady who was one of the ones who was really behind this bill. Come to find out that she had a sister who died from lung cancer, who was a smoker, and trying to get her to come to terms with the fact that her sister might not have died if she had vapor products to use instead of tobacco. I mean that would be a game changer. But getting past that wall, I mean, you can imagine it's just probably not going to happen.
And that's a lot of my concern. More as just an individual, not even a part of a vaping industry. That I see so much garbage news that comes out, and we're pelted with it. Fox News, ABC, NBC, morning shows, whatever shows are on in the morning, and then any kind of social media that comes across with tobacco-free kids and all the other ants groups, that it makes me really wonder if I show up and I speak to a committee, are they unfortunately predisposed to listen to what they've heard on all these? Well, the Surgeon General said this is true, and the FDA said that this is true, so it must be true. Or do you find that, like you said, there are some that are willing to pay attention?
There are going to be some that will pay attention, and others are just going to be rooted where they are. Again, same with any issue. You're going to have people who just never thought about it before. So those are going to be the ones you want to get to.
Wow. Yeah, that's definitely the ones that I definitely want to get to. Oh, I tell you what, right now we're going to take a short break, a few minutes. We've got to take time for our sponsors, because without our sponsors, Smoke Free Radio could not do what it does, and I sure as hell couldn't do what I'm doing, sitting here talking with State Representative Jason Osborne. So if you would, folks that are listening, paying attention in the chat room, we'll be right back.
Hey now, this is Dimitri with Smoke Free Radio reminding you to please show some love to our wonderful sponsors. Without them, there would be no Smoke Free Radio, and they are as follows. All the way from Florida, Moon Mountain Vapor, with locations in Florida, and their liquid available for wholesale and retail, moonmountainvapor.com. Some of the best custards and tobaccos on the market from the Brickwills Vaping Company. The lovely Shell with a vapor bar, locations in Texas, Virginia, and West Virginia. And of course online at thevaporbar.com. And who says you can't have award-winning e-liquid without cartoon characters? That's exactly what you're going to get at theplumeroom.com. And finally, of course, the Vaping Advocate magazine that has generously provided the telephone lines for you to communicate with us. Thank you for your support. And finally, for you, the listener, don't forget to check out the coupons and codes page on Smoke Free Radio. Pick up some e-liquid and save some money. From all of us here at Smoke Free Radio, thank you for your continued support.
Hey folks, P. Basardo here, and you're listening to Vaping and the Mic with Mike Peterson.
Coming back from our sponsor break this evening, talking with New Hampshire State Representative Jason Osborne, and we've covered a lot of material already, and I keep seeing more and more questions coming up here in the chat, and I want to talk about this for a few more minutes, and then I want to kind of segue and talk about a few different things. This one is about a flavor ban. There was a very extensive study done in a very scientific way by Dr. Farsalinos about flavors and the role that they play in helping adults transition from combustible cigarettes to vaping. And the FDA never even acknowledged that, even though it was put to them exactly the way they asked for, and at a decent expense, I might add. They had to go and buy the software to submit it to the FDA in time and all this other stuff. If people walked in and cited that survey when a flavor ban was brought up in a committee, would it really do any good? I lost you in there somewhere. No, I lost your audio. Hold on one second.
I guess I needed to unmute me.
Either I did or I probably muted it when it was my apology. But anyhow, if they were to cite that, would it actually do any good?
Again, it will. Some people will listen, other people won't. I got to tell you, I don't pay attention to surveys at all. Again, my background is as an economist, and I know that surveys, unless you're properly incentivizing people to give you the truth, you're not going to necessarily get it. So you ask someone a question, how do you know that they're actually giving you an honest answer?
Point well taken, and I can understand where people would come from in that. I know that. In the last part of this, I know a lot of people in the vaping industry look at this flavor survey that was done, and it was just for the United States, and only one response per IP address per home could respond. You couldn't do multiple IPs, anything. So it was really narrowed down to be as scientific as possible. Now, you mentioned, we're going to segue away from that, because there was something that you and I spoke about. You mentioned that you're an economist, and you said something that piqued my curiosity. In the news right now, New York, in and of itself, and I'm going to go back and find the actual piece of information for this one, because it caught my attention earlier today. New York wants to pass a congestion tax on vehicles coming into Manhattan during very particular times when the roads are like so crowded that you can't move for an hour. And the quote was, while the price has not been set in stone for New York, a report commissioned by Governor Cuomo's office recommends cars entering Manhattan during peak hours are charged $11.52 and trucks be charged $25.34 on top of any bridge tolls. How does that strike you as being a state representative?
To me, it's a simple supply and demand problem, right? They have a shortage at the current price of entry ability into the city. So imagine if you have a store where you're selling bottles of water and you sell out by 10 a.m. every morning. You either need to figure out how to get more water into your store, or you need to raise the price so that it lasts longer throughout the day.
And you mentioned that a simple solution would be to put something like an Easy Pass system into the cars that regularly frequent Manhattan. Then that's what made me curious. I'm like, okay, that's again a common sense thinking process. But I have to ask, is this truly to combat congestion, or do you think that New York is so far behind in its own revenue that it's just trying to find a different cash grab at different things?
Oh, it could be one or either of them, but I think it's pretty obvious that there's a congestion problem that needs to be solved.
I would agree. And
I mean, I spent a little bit of time in New York, and I mean, God, that was just a night. I couldn't even imagine trying to drive into that city. I took the train.
I've driven in New York, but I think it was at different points in time during the day, and I didn't go during rush hour. But I do know that other cities, Boston, LA, a couple of different places, are looking at the same thing, and they're closely watching what New York is going to do, because again, a precedence has been set somewhere, and they're going to go ahead and go through with it anyhow. You mentioned earlier, while you and I were talking, how long have you been a representative now?
This is my 5th year, third term. We do 2-year terms in New Hampshire.
Do you mind if I tell them, or do you want to tell them what you found with the color pink?
Yeah, so I make this as short as possible. I have a pink hat that I wear sometimes, and I notice that when I wear the pink hat, women and children will just come up and start talking to me on the street, which doesn't normally happen. So I developed this theory that if I put up giant pink signs, that people would vote for me, and it turned out to be true. And I didn't actually expect to win the first time that I went out there, but it happened, and I got more votes than everybody else, even though nobody knew who I was. They voted for a giant pink sign.
Because I've noticed that in a lot of the pictures when you're out in public, you do have various different hats that you wear, and even the one that you put on this evening. You know,
yes, a very large collection of hats.
Do you find people find you more approachable as you have a hat on?
No, not just with any old hat. I think I have to be exuding a little bit of more fruitiness, I guess, with like light colors and more clownish demeanor. So I'm a very large and scary looking dude otherwise. So
when you were standing behind the podium in the picture that I made the comment on, it looked like you were ready to come across and just start eating people simply because of the way the picture was taken. And it looks like an imposing kind of picture. I was like, damn.
Yes, I have that problem, yes.
When you get fired up and passionate about something, do you find it difficult to control I don't want to say control your temper, but control your language? Or have you been able to master that capability to remain on topic and present yourself well?
Well, so I'm not a long talker, so I don't do off the cuff very well. So if I know what I want to say, I get it done. I get it done quickly.
And that leaves less time for you to blow up and have a cow. And in today's, and this is way off topic, in today's culture, would you say people are more politically charged or less politically charged? Meaning, are they more likely to come out and vote on topics now, or do you find that there is more a growing sense of apathy that's running around?
Man, that's an interesting question. If you watch the media, right, they want us to believe that we are very charged right now. But then again, they're in the business of getting eyeballs on their program,
Mm-hmm.
and so they need to do that. So if you just watch the last couple elections, so in particular this midterm election, we lost our majority in the House and the Senate, and it was because my people were, I guess, fat and happy, and they were apathetic. Didn't want to come out and vote. Meanwhile, the other side, they were getting themselves amped up over the course of those 2 years, just in opposition to the current federal administration, and they were able to dominate. And I'm hopeful and anticipating that in 2020 we'll be able to reverse that situation, just based on the absurd bills that they're passing through the legislature right now.
Can I ask, when you're saying absurd, what kind of bills are you talking about?
I'm talking like the one you mentioned, licensing the life coaches. There's $500 million of new taxes and fees already that we've passed just since January, and God knows what they're going to do next year.
Oh my God!
Luckily, we have a governor who will be vetoing most of that, so it won't happen. But it'll be on the record that, hey, this is what you voted for. Like, what is that? What you want? Do you want to turn into a socialist hellhole?
You mentioned before we started the show, you were talking about tattoo parlors, massage parlors, and barbers.
Yes.
They wanted to license tattoo parlors and massage parlors. In what way?
So the artists themselves were already licensed, but what they wanted to do was also license the physical facilities, so that they would have the opportunity to go in and inspect them and make sure that everything was set up to their liking.
And what about the barbers? Because I remember you said something about the barbers, but I didn't catch all of it.
Yeah, there's nothing new about barbers, but they've been licensed for a long time. But yeah, in pretty much every state, you have to spend more time in barber training school than you need to spend in order to pilot a fighter jet.
Oh my God!
And just the reasons that they come up with whenever you try to repeal this stuff, like, oh no, you don't understand. People will die if a barber's tools are not sanitized properly. Then people are going to get cancer or infections, or and then the problem is, what does the license do? Is the license going to keep these things from happening?
No.
No.
A license is just a nice way to be able to pad the state budget or local budget.
That, and I think the majority of the time it's protectionism for existing businesses to prevent upstart competitors from entering the market.
That's one thing that you mentioned.
And it's part of what contributes to the cycle of poverty, right? If I'm a kid and I want to start braiding people's hair for a few bucks, I can't. They'll arrest me for it because I don't have a hair braiding license because I didn't go to cosmetology school for 4 years. and whatever expenses associated with that.
That to me is, I won't say all the foul language that's on my mind, but that to me is absurd. As an economist, if you were to take just a broad overview look of how things stand in the U.S. right now, would you say that we are in a better trending way or a worse trending way?
My suspicion is we're going to imminently find ourselves in a fairly bad recession.
Can I ask, what are some of the pinpoints that you might say that, or what might be some of the indicators?
Debt is the real issue. So look at the housing market, as well as the student loan bubble, as well as even the automobile loan bubble.
One's coming back around again?
Yeah, the average car loan right now is being written for 7 years, and people are trading in these cars with negative equity, and just piling on new debt on top of their trade-in, and that can't last. Right? It's like a house of cards. You keep piling. Eventually, it's gonna blow up, just like the housing bubble crisis that we've had.
Yeah, that one.
A decade or so ago.
That one was a big one. A curiosity question from my standpoint: what do you find better where you are than here in Ohio? Just curious.
Well, I moved here for a number of reasons, but my kids were very young. In fact, I didn't even have the third kid yet when I moved out here, and I just wanted a place to raise them with other like-minded people, and we were homeschoolers. There wasn't a very large community of homeschoolers where we were at in Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like when I moved here, I discovered that the average person I meet on the street is, for lack of a better word, a libertarian. Maybe they don't call themselves that, but that's their mindset.
What their viewpoints are.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
I mean, you drive around and every other car you see has a Gadsden flag bumper sticker or something of that nature. Just good, the kind of people I want to be around.
Do you find people in New Hampshire as a whole more positive minded than what you saw when you were in Ohio?
I don't know about positive minded. It's a different culture. It's a little more harsh sounding until you get used to it, and then you realize that people are just as friendly as they are in the Midwest, but they just maybe don't come across that way.
Yeah. Because I'm north of Youngstown, Ohio, and equidistant between Cleveland and Pittsburgh, right in the middle of Rust Belt, USA. And the people in this area are feeling more downtrodden, dour, and more apt, if they don't know you, to not be as polite as I remember when I was younger. And it's sad.
Yeah.
It's environmental, and I get it. But it was just curious what people out there were like. We're going to get ready and wrap up, and I, honest to God, I seriously appreciate you taking time this evening to come on and be able to talk to me, especially after me giving a somewhat of a smart-ass remark. But that really, in a couple of words or in a couple of sentences, if you had something that you wanted to tell either your constituents or people here in Ohio or across the U.S., what would you tell them? And it can be based upon anything. It's not just political. What would you tell them?
Yeah, hey, people in these legislatures are old people who want to take your stuff and tell you what to do. And if you don't like that, then you need to get out and vote.
And that's important because I know here in my area, people are apathetic and complacent. And the only time that they will do something is after a bill has been passed or after something has happened, and then they want to bitch about it.
Yep. Well, dishing out punishment is an effective tool. So maybe it's a little late, but there's a long future ahead of us, so we can get it turned around. I definitely see it in the vaping community around here. People are getting fired up over this tax bill that they're trying to pass. I think those people will be sorry when they see the hordes that come out against them.
Some of the people, and that's a very good point, because I don't think some people truly understand what it is that they're trying to accomplish or what they're doing. Okay, my last question for you. The flavor bans, Tobacco 21, the T21s, they're trying to crush vaping. In your estimation, are the major player states that get a lot of master settlement agreement money, are they trying to eradicate vaping to get people to go back to smoking?
My suspicion is that there are people who absolutely are trying to do that. I don't know that that's everybody, but people who see those dollars and cents disappearing, I guarantee you there's at least some motivation in that regard.
Would it be fair to say that California and New York, because they're the biggest recipients of income from taxation, not only on the state level, but also income from the master settlement agreement, they can see their incoming money eroding? Is it a fair thing to say that state won't tolerate that for very long? And they'll either try to get people to go back, or are they going to turn around and raise taxes somewhere else to make up for the shortcoming?
Yeah, well, in those states, that's clearly not the only monetary issues they have. Particularly California and New York, Connecticut, another big one. They're losing money left and right.
I've got other questions, but I'll save them. Maybe we can get together on another time, because it's getting ready. The conversation is going to go way south, and I'm not going to head in that direction for the evening. Jason, again, I appreciate you taking time to be on the show with me this evening. Everybody, you can check him out. Bill Tarling had listed where he's at on Facebook. If I remember correctly, well, Bill Tarling left the link in the chats, in the Facebook side. But again, this has been the New Hampshire State Representative, Jason Osborne. And if you're listening and you are in his area, hit him up, talk to him, see how you can help him out, see what you can get done. Again, thank you so much for being on the show tonight. I really appreciate it.
Oh, no problem at all. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. For everybody else that is listening that might catch us on the podcast, coming up next week we have Lindsay Stroud from Texas, and we're going to be talking to her about a couple things in Safada. And coming up at the week after that, we've got a little bit of a better surprise. So until next week, I hope everybody has a great weekend.